Hello everybody, coming at you with another video. In this one I'm going to be talking about the Tekken 7 tier lists. My name is CR Calkos and I am not a top player by any means. I'm still a yellow-orange rank scrub, but I have been studying this game ever since its release on console and even a little bit when it was just in arcades. And I really want to learn and try to get better at this game, and the best way to learn and get better is to take feedback from people that just might know more than you. So by releasing my thoughts on the tier list of Tekken 7, I can get your opinions in the comments, and you guys, especially if you're better than me, you can tell me where I'm right, where I'm wrong, where you think I'm right, where you think I'm wrong, and we can just get the discussion going, because, you know, there are no masters, there's only students. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to throw out my thoughts on the Tekken 7 Season 2 tier list, especially now that the dust is settled on it. All of the characters have been released, and they've been released for a little while now, so and there hasn't really been any major balance changes since 2.2. So it's been a little while, the dust is settled, we can finally, you know, have reasonable opinions on tier lists. So if my opinion on the tier list differs a little bit from you, just let me know in the comments why you think, you know, why you think I'm wrong. I'd love to hear it, for real. So the tier list is separated as such: S plus S, A plus A, B plus B. Typically you can get rid of the pluses here, but if I don't, then all of the characters are going to be smushed together, because there's no C or D tiers in this game. Every character is rather good at something. So, the balance of the game is absolutely impeccable. I think it's fantastic that they were able to do this, because I haven't seen a game this balanced in a long time, which is nice. So I added the pluses just to artificially separate them a little bit more, and allow me to really get into the nitty-gritty of why I think each character is where. So we're going to start at the very bottom of the list. The obvious bottom tiers in this game, unfortunately, are Gigas, Akuma, Panda. This is hard to argue. Whether or not these characters are good doesn't really matter, because they are. They are good at certain things. Akuma, Panda, you know, the bears have good range, and they don't have to worry too much about sidestepping. Gigas has one of the best and easiest to use 10-frame punishes in the game, and he's very good at approaching and bullying his way in, forcing mix-ups. But, you know, as much as they may have their strengths, they also have very deep flaws that keep them from going up here. And that's kind of a shame, because specifically Gigas, I like Gigas' playstyle. I like how he's able to bully his way in. And I would play him if he had more, but it always feels, as a Miguel main in Season 1, back when he was like trash, back when he was in this area, it always felt like I was handicapping myself, which is why I kind of pushed myself to learn Steve. Now, obviously, Miguel is a lot better, and we'll get to him eventually. Excuse me if I'm snorting. I'm a little congested. Hold on. Okay. I apologize. But yeah, I wish Gigas was just a little bit better. Just a little bit. As far as the top tiers go, the obvious top tier is Devil Jin. Like the Mishimas, he has, you know, good 50-50s off of wave dash, good pressure. The only real difference is that Devil Jin has a lot of tools to stop sidestep left. Like, he's got Laser Scraper and other things like that. So that's what really sets Devil Jin apart from the other Mishimas, is he has much stronger 50-50s. Much stronger 50-50s. Not to mention his Hell Sweep is probably the best out of all the Mishimas. Who am I kidding? Probably? It's absolutely the best out of all the Mishimas. Jin's is pretty good too, but Devil Jin, when you combine that with his mid options, is just, it's a cut. He's a cut above the rest, and he's always been a cut above the rest. I'm pretty sure. So that's an obvious one. But the other one, which can be kind of debated, I'm pretty sure I might get a few comments about this one, is Steve. I think Steve is up there as well with Devil Jin, for two reasons. One, Steve was already a good character in Season 1, but in Season 2 he got buffed. He got very buffed. Some of his options are a little bit safer. He didn't really get nerfed in a lot of areas, but most importantly, he went from having one of the worst rage drives in the game to one of the best rage drives in the game. That rage drive can land you a 70 damage combo out of nowhere. It's long range. It comes out in 14 frames. It's just, and it's plus on block too. And it leads to a duck mix-up if it's blocked. Seriously. It's an incredible rage drive. But secondly, the most important reason is that a lot of the matchups that he had a hard time with, like Zhao Yu and Jack and such, they got nerfed. So because those characters got nerfed and Steve got buffed, he jumped the tier list. Maybe more than he might deserve initially. But a lot of his problem mix-ups are not as much of a problem anymore. So... oh. Excuse me. Stay still. Okay. So, now that we have that out of the way, let's go with... you know what? I'm going to move the camera over here. Oops. Whoa, wrong one. Hold on. Stay still. I'm going to move the camera over here, and I'm going to start on this side. So, we're going to go with Yoshimitsu here. Solid B+. But Yoshimitsu is one of those characters that, unless he gets buffed like crazy, is not one of those characters that's going to break up into... he's not going to go into higher tier lists. And that's just the nature of his character. And I'm pretty sure Yoshimitsu players are going to feel similarly. He's a character that, you know... I have a theory when it comes to Yoshimitsu players. Most Yoshimitsu players, they play Yoshimitsu not necessarily because they're trying to win, but because they're trying to paint. They're trying to create art. You know, if they can't win in a crazy, stylish way that just shows their trickery and tomfoolery with the character, they're not going to bother. So Yoshimitsu being B+ to them is just fine. Let's go with Hachi. So Hachi is considered to be the weakest of the Mishimas because his hell sweep is not that strong compared to the other characters for the hell sweeps like Bob or Hwarang or whatever. But I do think that Hachi is still a rather good character. I think he goes into A+, and a lot of that is because his mids are really, really good. Collection of some of the best mids in the game, which is great for pressure. In Season 1, he was definitely down here with all of the plebeians, but they definitely buffed a lot of his moves. He has an easy-to-use parry now, and you can definitely go crazy with this character. Still a bit of an execution barrier, and if you're going with a Mishima style, Hachi's probably your last choice unless you really like the character, but he's still good. Speaking of Mishimas, Kazuya, definitely S tier. And a lot of this is because Electric Wind Godfists for all of the Mishimas got buffed, and it's a lot harder to sidestep them left. And for Kazuya, that is huge, because his entire game plan revolves around Electric Wind Godfist. It's his most important move. And making it better... My cats are being dumb shits. Get out of there. Anyway. Yeah, Kazuya, S tier. I really think he is in the upper echelon of characters. And if your execution is on point, there's no reason not to pick him, really. Let's see here. Jin. This one is hard. I think he's S tier. I don't think he's S+, though. Like, he could be. He could be here, but I don't think so. I think there's a couple of things that's holding Jin back, and a lot of it is... a lot of his game plan revolves around back 4 for counter hit fishing and for poking. But if you can solidly get around it, then, you know, you can beat Jin not too... it's hard. I don't know. Because back 4 really is a really good move, but he also has lots of options as well. Like, he's sort of like a... You know what? I'm going to put him here, mostly because he's not as good as Devil Jin, at least in my opinion. So I think he's got a spot right here. All right, next up, we're going to go with, let's do Brian. Brian is a hard one to pin down. A lot of when Season 2 first released, of course, there was the bug that Taunt lost all tracking to one side, which meant that if you teched to his right on Wake Up, you could avoid the taunt altogether. That was fixed. So with Brian, I do think he's A+. I think he could be a better character. He's definitely a noob stomper, though. He's definitely one of those characters that if you're competent with Brian and you're going up against somebody that doesn't know what to do, you can just ruffle stomp them all day. Especially since, like, you know, newer players, they're gonna have a hard time blocking Snake Edge. They're gonna have a hard time dealing with Orbital. They're gonna have a hard time dealing with back one, with taunt Oki setups. You know, with all of the basic Brian stuff, right? So, I feel like Brian is one of those characters, though, that you can just take them as high as you want. Brian may as well be SSS tier, if you're good enough. We see that with Jimmy Tran. We see that with Nee, you know. But at the end of the day, if you're talking as objectively as possible with a game like Tekken, I think Brian is A+ tier. I don't think he's good enough to go into S tier. Lars! Big boy Lars! Wow, Season 2 was interesting for him. He had a very interesting path, because in Season 2, he had the best 12-frame punish in the game, and it was a move that you could basically throw out even as a whiff punisher to do insane amounts of damage, and it worked as a rage drive. It connected into his rage drive on natural hit as well. Lars is an interesting beast, because his stances got buffed. They're a lot more evasive than they used to be. But at the same time, if you're picking an evasive character, you want to go with someone like Xiao Yu or Fang, right? You don't want to go with Lars here. Lars is more of a mix-up character, and mix-ups aren't that strong in this game. They're pretty strong, but I feel like his huge weakness to sidestep right in one stance and sidestep left in the other stance, it's hard. It's really difficult, because if you're on point with your sidesteps, Lars can't do anything to you. Like, it's impossible. You just can't. I really think because of his weakness to opening up turtles, he should go in the B+ tier. Not to say that he's a terrible character, but I feel like he really still, even now, even after his buffs, he still needs some minor adjustments to make him into a complete character. Because, you know, I started learning him because I got blown up by a Lars player not too long ago. I feel like he's not even a complete character. I feel like there's something missing. Anyway, Lars in B+ tier. Eliza! I think Eliza, whatever you want to say, goes in A tier. They definitely changed the way that you want to play her by weakening her low pokes, but making her chainsaw stance much more effective. They definitely want you to go in a lot more with Eliza, be more aggressive than before. Because in Season 1, you wanted to play Eliza like a poke-heavy, hit-and-run style character. Now you want to go in and force your, basically enforce and hold your ground with chainsaw mix-ups. But because she does have the mix-up with running 2, because she can do running 2 and I think forward 3-3. I don't remember what the notation is. It's the twirly kicks, whatever it is. That does put her a cut above the rest. Yeah, no, I think she goes in A+ tier. I think she's a solid character. Oh, Dragunov, what have they done to you? Dragunov, it was that one move. It was down 2. They nerfed down 2 and made it harder to get easy plus frames off of it, and that was it. That was it. They nerfed a few other tools, but that was the big one, down 2, because down 2 was such a powerful tool with Dragunov that doing that, he used to be up here, but now he's down at A+ tier. However, they did give him some really cool tools, like more damaging combo routes if your execution is up to snuff. So he definitely didn't drop all the way down. He's solidly in A+ tier, and he's still a very formidable character. Speaking of nerfs from the top tiers, let's go to Paul. Paul! So, 2 things they did with Paul. They nerfed his backsway 4, which used to be +3 on block, and now it's +1. That was such a big deal, because that move was one of the biggest reasons why Paul was so good in Season 1. Because you could do that, you're +3, and you still have plenty of options. Now with it being +1, you still have options, but you can't enforce as well as you used to be able to. Opponents, it's easier for them to sidestep and such. Not only that, but they nerfed back 1-2, and they nerfed Death Fist just a little bit. So a lot of his really key tools, they definitely nerfed. But they did give him, what is it, down 1+4, down 2+3. It's the sidestep shoulder tackle, which if it lands, you can do a Death Fist right afterward for massive amounts of damage. And what's great about that move as well is it allows you to disrespect plus frames. Like, if someone comes in with a move that's +3 or +4 on block, you can do that, and if they don't do a tracking or a homing move, you can just do the shoulder into Death Fist for massive amounts of damage. It makes it much easier to disrespect opponents. So I do think Paul is still in S tier despite the nerfs. I think he still wrecks shit. In tournament play, in online play, he's still a very formidable, explosive character. Now, Law is such an interesting character in Season 2 because he got changed a lot. Not just in the initial Season 2 patch, but more or less in the patches that came afterward, the mini balance changes. Like, there was once a time when you could get a full launch off of Dragon Tail. Like, it was crazy. It made online play with this character much harder. Well, specifically if you were going against them. The big change with Law, the big buff that he got, though, was that the hitbox and legend kick was lowered, meaning that his extremely difficult bread and butter is a lot easier to do now. He also has more flexible combo routes, and he still has the same freestyle party animal type of play that he always had. So I think he's solid A+. I think he's just a little bit better than he was before, but not enough to get into the S tiers. Let's go with Bob. Bob was definitely lacking in Season 1. In Season 2, they brought him up to par by allowing you a lot more damage on combos. However, he was a little bit too strong, specifically with his wall game. If you wall splatted, you could just do tons of damage with Bob with no effort. So they nerfed that. And overall, though, they buffed his mids. And he's a lot more formidable now than he was before. But I do think he's only A tier. I don't think it was enough to bring him up any higher. I do think he still has problems, specifically with Wave Dash. Because with Wave Dash, it's like you're only you don't really have a safe option out of Wave Dash. You don't have anything that is like, okay, I can do this just to check the opponent, right? It's like when you're going in with a Wave Dash, it's all or nothing. It feels like with Bob. Maybe I'm a scrub. I don't know. Nina. So Nina was definitely one of those characters that was A tier. And not a lot of people really played the character because the execution barrier for this character is quite high, especially if you want to make the most for her while standing mix-ups. Or not while standing mix-ups, but while standing one wall carry, excuse me. They made that better because they made the initial hit of while standing one do more damage and made the last two hits of the string, I think it's while standing 1+2, I don't remember. But they made that do less damage. But it means that while standing one loops are a lot stronger than they used to do. A combo with while standing one loops does much more damage. They also buffed her lows a fair amount. And they gave her a very good wall bounce in running blonde bombs. So if you can effectively land running blonde bombs, boy oh boy, she is formidable, especially near the wall. So I do think she goes in A+ tier. I think she's a formidable character, but you're still not going to see a lot of these a lot of Nina players because Nina's execution barrier is still very, very high. So she's definitely still a specialist character, but unlike in Season 1, you will be rewarded for playing well with her. Now we go to Lily. Lily's biggest weakness was sidestep. She did not have any really good homing or tracking moves. You could sidestep her all day. Now she has homing moves. She has some very good ones now. So with that, I think she goes from A tier to A+, just like everybody else. Seemingly. Like, it's hard to distinguish when it comes to the A and the A+, right? Because there's just a lot of characters that are just straight up solid. You know, they have their problems, but their strengths are many. There's a lot of strengths with these characters. So expect this section right here to get a little crowded. Now we go to Asuka. This is a bit controversial, I think, because a lot of people put Asuka in the A+ range, but I really think Asuka is S tier. She can disrespect a lot of offense with her incredible parry, and she also has a lot more safety now. Her forward 3 is extremely good. It's a tracking move that's safe on block and launches on counter hit. It's really, really good. Asuka is a character that at high levels people might have a little bit of trouble, but until then she is a beast. I really think she is an extremely good character. You can play her very disrespectfully and go very far with it. A very good turtle right here. Speaking of turtles, actually, I'll segment to Jack 7. I think Jack 7 is still S tier. No, I don't. No, I don't. They nerfed his, they nerfed the jackhammer. The jackhammer was such a big one. Forward 1, that was such a big move, and now it's a lot easier to sidestep. So with that, I think Jack 7 goes an A+, because they did nerf several of his tools. But he still has good with punish and down forward 2. But I feel like the best Jack players now are going to have to be a little bit more creative, because before you could do really well with Jack with just like 4 or 5 moves. Like, that's all you needed. Now you have to be a little bit more creative and crazy with the character, which is nice. Especially since Jack is still very easy to use. Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu is still S tier. She's not as good as she was before. She definitely did get nerfed. Down forward 1 doesn't have the tracking that it used to. Back turn 4, the launcher, I think it's 4, is like minus 17 on block and doesn't have pushback, which means the whole cast can launch punish it. So, Art of Phoenix is still a pain in the ass, though. Art of Phoenix is a very easy-to-use stance that allows you to steal turns very easily, especially if your opponent is frantically trying to steal turns themselves with highs. I think Art of Phoenix is just... It's still really good. They didn't do anything to it, which I think is important. Art of Phoenix is what makes this character good and worth playing. So, Xiao Yu is still an S-tier character, I think. Fang. The big thing that they did with Fang, and the reason why, without question, I think he's in the A tier rather than in the A+ or the S tier, is that the auto guard period for the backsway was nerfed. It used to be 15 frames, but now it's 20 frames, which means if you predictably try to make something whiff, if your opponent does a long-range move or does pressure, they can hit you out of it much easier than they used to be. That hurts. That is a big deal. So Fang, I think, is one of the biggest sufferers of Season 2. I really think that Fang, more so than a lot of other characters, just he went from here and just went right down to A. He's still a good character. He's still a wise choice, especially if you have an understanding of his tricky moveset, because he has a lot of moves that look like mids but are actually lows. So that right there, I think, it still makes him formidable, but he's not nearly as good as he used to be. He got hit really hard. Leo. Oh my good golly god, Leo. Leo had a lot of easy-to-use tools that made him very good in Season 1. He used to be way up here. Or she, excuse me. The back 1 launching on counter hit. The up 3+4 loops. I think it's 3+4. I can't remember. That, you know, made her extremely good. But now, what they did was they nerfed the easy-to-use tools, but they actually buffed Leo a lot. Like, she got a lot of really nice tools that she can use that aren't just, you know, the same 2 or 3 moves over again. So she's a lot like Jack in that manner. But Leo is a character that if you're decent with Leo, you might have a hard time. But if you're really good with Leo, she is a monster. I really think she's still an S tier character. The harder to use tools are, you know, they're harder to use, but they're very, very good now. King. Okay, so King, just by the sheer amount of options that he has that are worth using, I think he went from A+, right up to S. His mids are stronger, his low pokes are still rather good, and his grab mix-ups are even stronger now than they used to. He's a very, very good character now. But of course, he still has a lot of mid-high moves that are ducked and punished, so you have to be a little careful with King. Against someone who knows the mashup, you can't just go hog wild. You've got to... You've really got to be on your toes. But if you're good with King, you're rewarded for your efforts, because King definitely, I think, is an S-tier character here. Let's go with Caterina. Caterina, she was A-tier. She had a hard time opening turtles up. I think Caterina goes in A+ now. She has better mix-ups with 444 into Harrier, because she has an option for everything now, and it's not... The issue is that it's not as mindless as it used to be. But she also has a really good running move now, because her running 3 used to be -5, and now it's +5, I think. I know it's plus on block rather than negative, which is really good. It makes it easier for her to approach with plus. Her jab strings also got buffed, which is great because her jab has lots of range. So while Caterina is not as mindless as she used to be, I do think she's a better character overall. A+ she goes. I'm gonna save the DLC characters for last, so we're gonna go with Shaheen. Shaheen is a hard one. He's one of those characters that, again, had a small move pool that you could use for success. Like, he used to be up here. Now he's down here because they nerfed those tools. And while they did buff sneak stamps, and they gave you a lot more ways, they gave you several more ways to go into sneak stamps to enforce a mix-up, that's not what Shaheen was about. Shaheen was never about going into sneak to enforce a mix-up. Because if you try to do that, you'll just get jabbed out of everything. Because he doesn't have a lot of really good ways to go into it. And pretty much everything in it is a risk, except for, well, they actually did buff sneak stance as well, because, 1, gives you a mini combo on counter hit, and 2 is safer on block. I think it comes out a little bit faster, too. The problem is that they nerfed Shaheen's Magic 4. You can't get a combo off of just a raw Magic 4. You have to do a string now. You have to commit to either 4-1, 4-3, or 4-4. Which I think that really hurts Shaheen in the long run. So Shaheen, I think, is A tier. He's still very no-nonsense, though, and extremely easy to play. So if you're looking for a starter character to play in Tekken 7, I do recommend Shaheen over a lot of other members of the cast. Because he's easy to use, and he's definitely not bad, but I do think that they should have toned it down a little bit on nerfing his core tools. I don't think buffing sneak stance was... I don't think buffing sneak stance and nerfing what made him a really good character... Hey, stop it. ...was the way to go. I think Shaheen is one of those characters that I do think could have been a little bit better. Hi, critter. Alright, so Kazumi. Kazumi, again, in the A tier. The biggest thing with Kazumi, like, everybody knows about how she got nerfed. Her 50-50s aren't as good as they used to be. But the big thing for me with Kazumi is they gave her the backwards float. And you can go into forward float to try and bait a nerf. And the tracking on her forwards float, too, I don't remember what the stance is called, I'm sorry, did get really good tracking, so you can't just sidestep it anymore. The problem is that she doesn't get any moves out of back float. So like, a really cool thing that you should be able to do with Kazumi is float forward in, like, range 2, and then try to bait a punish from your, or a keep out move from your opponent, and then go backwards, make it whiff, and then do a move out of the backwards float. But you can't, because the backwards float doesn't have any moves. Why? I think because of that alone, Kazumi goes into A tier. Like, if they gave her just, like, 3 or 4 moves out of the backwards float, she would be a very formidable character. And she would be very good at baiting whiffs. But until then, she's an A tier. She got hurt really hard. Hwoarang's approach game got buffed massively. I think it's the forward 3-4. It's the dual kicks that have armor now, and you can cancel them into an armored left flamingo, I think. I don't know a lot about Hwoarang. I really need to learn this character. But his combo damage at the wall got nerfed, but his combo damage away from the wall got buffed. So Hwoarang, I think, is definitely in the A+ tier. They changed him a lot, but the big thing that they did with him is that they made his down 3-4 a lot stronger because the pushback on it got lessened. So now it's easier to enforce the mix-up when you do the move, whether it's blocked or not. It's still, of course, you can still launch it if you duck and block the initial hit of the move because it is a low-high string, but most people aren't going to be doing that, especially if you enforce with strong mids, which Hwoarang has plenty. So, yeah, Hwoarang, A+ tier, no question. Claudio. I think Claudio is still an A tier. A lot of people, when Season 2 first came out, like when the patch notes were released, got really excited because they showed that you could do all of the moves from Starburst outside of Starburst. But what people didn't realize then was that the moves are not very good when you use them outside of Starburst. They're trash. They're not nearly as good as their regular Starburst versions. So Claudio, while he is a little bit better at breaking down turtles, his lows did get buffed a little bit. They're still not good enough. He definitely needs better lows. He still struggles against players that just block all day. His hop kick got nerfed on recovery as well, which hurts quite a bit. So A tier, Claudio remains. Josie, A tier. A lot of this is just they tried to buff Josie, but I feel like they didn't do enough with her. For a poking character that doesn't have a generic down forward 1 to work with, you need better tools, and unfortunately she doesn't have them. Her wall bounce is also extremely weak. Arguably the worst wall bounce in the game, if not one of the worst, at least. So Josie is still pretty good, but definitely in the A tier. I feel like she could be a little bit better. Master Raven, I believe Master Raven is kind of a rough one. I think she's in the A tier, but she's definitely a candidate for A+. And a lot of that is, her back turn stance definitely got buffed quite a bit. She has a lot of really good tools, including armor move now. So if she's plus on block, or going in with a back turn, she can do the armor move to try and get you to freeze, stay in place. Especially since you get free follow-ups if it hits. So, I do think that she is a much more solid character, but I don't think they did enough to her to warrant having her go up to A+ tier. Oh my god, Eddie. Eddie is B+. He was bad before, well, I shouldn't say bad, but because none of the characters are really bad per se. As far as the logic of tier lists go, they're all really good characters. In any other fighting game, you know, Gigas would be an A tier. But Eddie just, I don't get it. I don't know why they nerfed things like sidestep 3+4. It's such a weird, janky move, and the fact that they made it even jankier is kind of, I don't get it. Speaking of B+, Eliza! Like most of the 2D characters, I'm going to put Akuma here too because they're in a similar family. But the 2D characters, I really still feel they're not that great. They're definitely a bit better than they were before, but even then, I still think that compared to the other buffs that people got, because a lot of the roster got buffed, I still think they're, just by the nature of the amount of characters that got buffed, I think they're still in B+ tier. They still are very high risk, and while they can pump out the damage, it's extremely situational. Specifically with Akuma, obviously, after Super Akuma won the mix-up in Lyon, France, lots of people were calling for Akuma to straight up be removed from the game. Like, they say that he's not Tekken, but what people don't realize is that Akuma is hard to play by the nature of his character archetype. You have to be risky all the time with this character. You don't have any kind of safety, ever. Okay. Miguel. Miguel was definitely B+ tier in Season 1. And a lot of that had to do with Savage Stance. Savage Stance was not powerful. In fact, it was very, very weak. So for a momentum-based character that is built around tagging with a move and then going into Savage Stance, man, people could disrespect that all day. Now he is definitely an A+ character because they took a look at Savage Stance and straight up buffed everything in it. Pretty much everything in Savage Stance got a buff. And because of that, it's a lot scarier to go up against a Miguel that knows how to use the stance effectively. Now, the reason why he's not up here is because they still didn't buff the range on his jab tools. Which is what a lot of Miguel players, myself included, really wanted. They wanted back one, his 1-2 string, his 2-1 string, and his down forward 1 to have more range. But they didn't buff that. Instead, they buffed the range on a lot of his kicks. Down forward 4, forward 4, down forward 3-2, and even more got nice buffs in range, but not his jab tools, which is so strange. And I feel like if they were to buff his jab tools, his jab pressure game just a little bit, he would be a very formidable character. But until then, A+ tier he goes. Still definitely a much better character than he used to be. Now we go to Lee. So, if you are bad at Tekken, Lee is a B tier character. His execution barrier is insane, and I do believe he's the hardest character to use in the game right now. If they add more, then maybe that'll change, but Lee's execution barrier is absolutely insane. But he has, if you do have good execution, he has one of the best mix-up stances in Hitman. He's got incredible keep-out game, one of the best. He's got one of the best 10-frame punishers in Acid Rain. I think it's Acid Rain. 1-3-3-3, the just frames. So if you're good with Lee, I think he's S+ tier. Really, I really do. The character has it all. The biggest thing that holds Lee back is his execution barrier. It is insane. It doesn't know when to say when. And in my opinion, I feel like it's a bit too much. I feel like I would nerf the character just a little bit to trade it in for a bit more lenient execution. But to be honest, I'm not a Lee player. Lee players don't care. Lee players are willing to put up with it because they know that the rewards they get for playing Lee well is extremely good. So Lee, I really think he's one of the best characters in the game. S+ tier all the way. It's just, do you have the balls to be able to do it? Lucky Chloe. So Lucky Chloe now finally has a way to manually go into back turn, which is huge. That's absolutely massive because like Xiao Yu, you know, she can force back turn mix-ups more easily now because before she used to have to do a move into back turn. Now she can just do it. Not only that, but her back turn stance crushes lows. So if your opponent tries to tag you with a low move, you can go into back turn, hop over it, and then force Cali roll mix-ups. Excuse me. And because of that, I think Lucky Chloe goes into A+ tier. She did get buffed on other things. Her whiff punish game is a little bit better than it used to be. Her lows are better as well. I think all around she's a much better character. Now we go to the DLC characters. We'll start with Geese Howard here. Geese, man, this tier is getting really crowded. You know what I'm gonna do? You know, I'm just gonna put Geese right here for now. I'm gonna add a, nope, back. I'm gonna add a tier above. Okay. And let me change the colors real quick. I apologize for the holdup. Okay. So I'm going to change this to A++. And the only reason I'm doing this is because the A+ tier is getting a little crowded. But to be honest, I think the game, you know, a really good game has a very crowded set of tiers. But the other thing I can do as well is probably move some characters to S+, and then some of these to S. Now, you know what? That's definitely better, I think. Or not. Ah, screw it. I did it anyway. Alright, so I think Dragunov goes here. Let's see here. I think Miguel goes here. Definitely. Mostly because of all the Savage Stance buffs. And I think Law goes here. And I think that's about it. Yeah, we'll do that. So, Geese Howard, despite his nerf on meter gain, I think he's all around a better character. So I do think he goes in the A++ tier. Geese mains in the comment section, please let me know. Because I find him to be the most unorthodox character out of the rest of the roster. Even Steve, which I do play. I am a Steve player. Steve and Miguel are my mains. So, you know, chime in chat if you think I'm wrong about this. Noctis! Noctis, I do think he's in B+ tier. Despite, you know, the fact that you can win with him with just 2 moves, down back 2 and back 1+2. Noctis has a real balance problem because if you know the matchup, he's extremely easy to take care of. But if you don't know the matchup, he just wrecks your shit. But a lot of Noctis, of course, is just making sure you sidestep the back 1+2 and block and launch punish the down back 2. I think that's a lot of it. Like, he has other tools, obviously, but if you know the matchup, he's not very good. But if you don't, he basically is up here. So, this is one of those characters that you're definitely going to have to lab no matter what. Alright. Let's go with Lei here. We're going to go in order of release. Lei, I think, goes here. And the reason why is because he has a ridiculous amount of moves. He has 13 different stances. But it's a lot of work to be able to play this character effectively, but I don't think you're rewarded properly for being able to do it. Or for actually working hard to make this character work. So I think he goes in the A tier, and I really think that if they do a Season 3, he's one of those characters that should be up here. Because he's extremely difficult to play, and even if he's up here, you're not going to see a lot of these Lei players. But for now, he's here, and you're not going to see a lot of them. Okay. Next, we're going to do Anna. Boy, Anna is not a good character. I feel like if you're playing Anna, you're a character specialist. And to be honest, you should be doing the work to play Nina. That's just my opinion. She has a really strong fully crouched mix-up, and if you're good at enforcing that, she can be a nightmare to deal with. But because her on-block punishment is terrible, like arguably the worst in the game, you can kind of go hog wild on her, and you don't have to worry too much. Next up, we have Marduk. Marduk, mostly because of his tackles. And the force 50-50 you get from a successful tackle, I really think he goes in A++ tier. This character is very good. Not as good as he could be, obviously, but you can go very far with Marduk with just a small amount of tools, but it never really feels unfair, especially since his lows are not that great. But he's not a character that, you know, thrives on low poking. He's a character that thrives on enforcing the tackle. So I do think he's a solid character, and I don't think he really needs to be changed if they do a Season 3. Armor King. Armor King could be better. He's got a really cool option select where you can do, like, if you press 3 buttons at the same time after a giant swing motion, you can do basically all of his throws at once, which is a really cool option select. And it means that there's no such thing as conditioning. You truly force the opponent to guess, because even you don't know what you're doing. But even then, because he has risky lows, and because his mids are not as good, and because he doesn't have a lot of safe options out of Wave Dash, like, you know, safe poking tools, I feel like Armor King goes in A tier. Now we go to Negan. Negan's kind of tough, because like Lars, I feel like something is missing. I feel like something is missing with Negan, but I'm still not sure if he goes here, here, or here. I mean, a lot of people labbed him, and I feel like a lot of Negan players will agree with me that Negan goes either here or here. I'll put him here for now, but a lot of Negan's flaws involve his lack of lows. He doesn't have strong lows. He has one good low, like he has one rather good low, and I think down back 2. If it hits, it goes into Intimidate for a free mix-up. But even then, I think it's launch punishable. I think it's minus 14. While it's not low parryable, it's launch punishable. So that, I think, hurts the character a lot in the long run. And if they do a Season 3, they need to give him a couple of rather good low pokes that aren't too risky to use. I think that's what really hurts the character. Julia, to be honest, I don't know a lot about Julia, so I'm just going to put her in A tier. Sound off in the comments where you think she could go. Let me see if there's any adjustments I can make. I don't think anybody else belongs in S+ tier. Paul could, but they nerfed his most important tool, the sway back 4. Or the back sway, excuse me. Jin is a candidate for S+ tier, but I'm not sure. But yeah, this is a pretty well-rounded, balanced tier list. One thing about Namco that I like is that, a lot of characters got nerfed. Like Devil Jin did, Dragunov did, Geese did, but he also got buffed in certain ways. Paul did, but at the same time, like even characters like Fang and Shaheen that fell quite a bit on the tier list, at least in my opinion, they're still very formidable characters. Jack 7 even, still very formidable. In fact, I think Jack 7 should go up here. So Namco with Season 2, with the buffs, they did a very good job with the buffs, but they also did a very good job with the nerfs. Because even characters that got nerfed are still very formidable. So I think, I think it's fantastic. They did a very good job with Season 2. And with Season 3, thankfully, they don't even have to adjust too much. They just need, if anything, they just need to bring Devil Jin back down to the rest of the fucking Mishimas. Devil Jin has always been top tier ever since Tekken 5. And maybe take Gigas and bring him up here somewhere. But yeah, now that the dust has settled and all of the DLC characters have been released, I think Namco did a fantastic job. But yeah, that's my tier list, and I'd like to know what you guys think. So thank you very much for watching. This has been CR Calkos, and I will see you next time.